Okay, so I thought we would do a real quick overview of redistricting reform and legislation introduced, which is what we're fighting for. So, you know the problem. Our values are what we keep our democracy strong, but extreme partisan gerrymandering undermines them. Both parties have done it. That's a Dem map at the top and a GOP map at the bottom. And even though in some ways they look kind of similar, they are strongly gerrymandered for each of their parties. And the solution is, at least we hope for this redrawing, to get some improvements in processing criteria. And I'll talk about how those can be developed, because bills are not the only way to develop an improved process for this year. In the long term, as you will have gathered, you probably already know, we would like to see a nonpartisan redistricting commission where it's citizens and not politicians who are in charge. And gerrymandering undermines our guarantee of a free election, which is right in our state constitution. It gives safe seats to incumbents of both parties. It gives more to the party that can sit in control, but it gives safe seats to both parties. And that means that when you say someone's in a safe seat, that means they really are not going to face serious competition. It's a predetermined outcome, whether for the Dems or for the Republicans. I live in Chapel Hill. We are going to elect Dems. Of course, there are other parts of the state that are always going to go GOP, and there are some that are, can go either way. But the way you draw the lines, that has a big impact on that. And we really need competition so that our votes matter, so that they have to pay attention to us. And if they're in safe seats, to an exaggerated extent through gerrymandering, they really don't have to listen. And more importantly, we cannot hold them accountable, because as a practical matter, it's very difficult to vote them out. I think last round, one legislator only lost in the primary. So if they're incumbents, they have a really high chance of winning in the primary and then going on to succeed. So here is a little chart that is designed to answer the question, how safe are those seats? And this is the court supervised map in 2019 and how that was designed to perform. And this analysis of categorizing them as all the way from safe Republican on the left, all the way through, a likely Republican, lean Republican, toss up, and then the same on the D side. The districts under there, which you can kind of ignore, but just look at how long that line is under safe, and look at how also the pretty good number under safe, under likely, and then there are a few only really that are toss up. And 93 of the 120 seats in the North Carolina House after the court supervised redraw were still safe or likely wins for one party or the other. That's how they were designed. That's how they also performed. In fact, to some extent, even more extreme than that. Every single safe, likely, and every lean seat as well performed just as designed. There were only in that little narrow band of toss-up seats where half of those went the other way, but those are seats that were designed to be, to have only 1 or 2 points difference in what they were predicted. And the analysis of these seats, I should say, also comes from Civitas Institute, which is now part of the John Locke Foundation. John Locke, I think is what it's called now. They merged the two things together. So very right-leaning think tank, but a very strong supporter of redistricting reform because they're libertarians. And we don't agree necessarily with, I don't agree anyway with other stuff that they advocate, but we do agree with their stand on redistricting. They want reform. So how do we fix it? Well, the 3 questions that we have come up with to describe any redistricting system: who draws the maps, who approves the maps, how are they drawn? And in the first 2, there are the same 2 choices: legislative leaders draw the maps or citizens commission. And if the commission draws the maps, the legislature may still approve it. And I should say that in the 2 states, which are New York and Virginia, that do not have the ability to collect petitions and put something on the ballot directly through a citizen initiative, those are the only states that have adopted a commission through the legislature. And in both of those, it is an advisory commission, meaning that the Citizens Commission draws the map, and then the legislature still has a vote on the maps. Although in Virginia, it's very constrained. So that one is as close to an independent commission as you can get, and still have, and still have the legislature vote. Then how are the maps drawn is where we get the process parts, so transparent citizen input, and the criteria. Is it the things we've been talking about? Are they compact? And they have to be contiguous. Do they keep communities whole or divide up people for political reasons? Did they use political data to draw the maps or seek a political objective? And what have they done to ensure that they're complying with the Voting Rights Act? Oops, sorry. Well, so how does it work now? Well, as we probably figured this out, that the legislature draws the maps and they approve the maps. And there's very little, as I said before, in that limits how they can do that. So I won't go with that. Ideally, we want a citizens commission. Again, you know that. But it's kind of too late because we would have to get a constitutional amendment, and that you cannot do at the present time because it's too late because it would have to go on the ballot. So we're stuck with the legislature drawing and approving the maps, but maybe we can get some improvements down here. One of the things that has changed is that there's a new survey out, just came out like in the past month, I believe, that shows that for the first time that I've seen, that the Republican voters, with the Republicans in charge, favor redistricting reform and say that it's an important voting issue to them personally. And that I think, and we've talked to some of the legislators some of our interviews, they said, yeah, they think this makes a change and really emphasized how important it is to get to those Republican voters and their like-minded neighbors who do not know that much about redistricting, because now they are saying that they recognize that gerrymandering is a problem. Some of that may be because the state will be seeing demographic change in the future. So you've seen this enough times. This bill shows shows the basic information on it. We've kind of gone over this in the past, and I don't want to duplicate what we've said. I was pleased to hear Natasha, really talking about this new method, because I think it really is an important advance in trying to measure gerrymanders. There was the efficiency gap, which was brought forward as another approach. It was not accepted by the Supreme Court, but in some ways, I won't say more importantly, but perhaps more significantly, Mattingly, the chair at Duke, of the chair of the math department, I assume he knows his math. I'm going to go with that. He does not like the efficiency gap. He won't even answer questions about it. So he and other mathy types around the country have come up with this other way, which has been really worked in court, because they can see that, the little line of all the different maps, how they performed on a given district, and way off to one side is the legislatures, how the legislature's map would perform. And they can just see those little dots out there in the hinterlands and say, that doesn't look right. So the county clusters, we've discussed those, and these are just crazy. You just have to live with them. Again, it would try to pick the most neutral cluster map that meets the requirements of having groups of counties that within that group can come very close to electing, to creating districts that have the necessary ideal population, which is the total population of the state divided by the number of districts. So every district has to have the same population, pretty close. And all the things that are out there on the Fix Our Democracy Act, all kinds of great things, including redistricting reform, but limiting super PACs and prohibiting voter roll purging, online, expanded online automatic voter registration, all kinds of stuff like that. It's a good bill. It's really a messaging bill, which is to say we don't necessarily expect it to pass. And we won't get everything we want, but we still hope to get a process. And that can only happen in law if the bills are taken up in the redistricting committees and acted on, something happens. However, there is an alternative way to get an improvement in the process and criteria. And that is because when the committees meet, when the redistricting committees meet, the first thing they do is they adopt the process and criteria as not as a law, but as an internal committee process. Like if we have a committee in the league and they get together and say, well, are we going to agree to use Robert's rules and votes are going to be by majority or whatever it is, committees can set their own process. And that is true in the legislature as well. They can say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And in the ones that I've observed, which I only moved here in 2017, so I've only seen the more recent ones, the committee did in fact adopt rules that sort of included some criteria and process. For example, whether they would hold hearings, that kind of thing. So, and they voted on each one of those provisions, and they've done that every time I have observed them. So I think I think it's a standard thing, and they will do that when the committee meets to do the redrawing. The Senate and House committees will each set up their process, and that is in fact where the famous quote comes from of 10 and 3. Oh, that's something else I should show you on the legislative website. I don't really have time to. Well, it's worth seeing. Anyway, I'll show that quickly. They will adopt some rules, and when Lewis didn't just say that he wanted to elect 10 Republicans and 3 Democrats because he thought it was better for the state, and he should draw maps that would lead to that great outcome. He did say that, but they actually voted on that in committee. There is one of the rules that they set was called partisan advantage, and it said that there would be a partisan advantage, and it would be for the Republicans, and they would try to maintain the same split as was in the map before they were ordered to redraw it, which was 10 and 3. So that is indeed what they did. So calling legislators, remember, they work for us. It doesn't mean you should be impolite. Never do that. That just makes them mad. And you will most likely, certainly, depending on which office you call, if you call the Speaker's office, which Representative Insco and others have strongly encouraged us to reach out to them because they're the decision makers, then you'll be speaking to a legislative assistant or another assistant. Obviously, the Speaker and the President Pro Tem have multiple people in their offices. But still, ask if you can speak to the legislator. If they say no, which is quite possible, they're not available, they'll give you an excuse, a polite excuse. No, I'm sorry, he's not available. He's in a meeting. Hold on. Don't be offended, and don't push back on that. I mean, there's no point. Just say you'd like them to pass on the message, and then go ahead and start saying that you would like them to hear these bills, and you think they're very important, and so forth and so on. Use the script, but you can certainly modify that. Be sure to thank them. It's not easy being in LA, answering these calls all day, every day, and being harassed by some people, not by us. And so, be sure to thank them. And we're building relationships for the long term, and every little contact is a chance to build a relationship or damage it. And don't worry if you're talking and you sort of find yourself stumbling over your words. Not to worry, it doesn't matter. The important thing is to call and say that you're supporting Fair Maps reform, and that just, as long as you get that message, it doesn't matter if you get the bill numbers wrong. As long as you really get that, that across clearly. So you can call the bill sponsors, you can call the leadership. For the bill sponsors, these are easy calls. You're just calling them to say thanks for supporting this bill. They like that, they deserve our support for going to all the trouble, even though it's going to be tough to get these adopted. Or if you're calling the leadership or the members of the committee, then our message is hear the bills. That's what we want. It's also good to call your own representative, and our message, whether they are Dems or Republicans, our message to them is please ask the leadership to act on this. It's important. And we've written scripts for each of these and little short postcard messages, which you should have gotten. Preparation is very important. That's what makes you confident, is if you're prepared. And please keep track of how many calls you make. Just do little hatches, like click, 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 flash, click, 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 flash. Just type pen or whatever. And so we know how many calls or contacts postcards have been made, sent, etc. So you need to know what you want to say, and it's a good idea to practice it a couple of times. And when you practice it, you may come across something that's just not the way you would say it. And that's fine. You should say it the way it's natural to you, so it comes across, excuse me, as genuine, as really being you. And we also provided a briefing, which I think went out separately, on his information on the bills, as well as the way redistricting works in North Carolina, which I was actually going to discuss really briefly. Please know it's 4 pages, including at the last page is a bullet point summarizing each of the bills, all on 1 page, so that if for some reason you're calling somebody and they say, what do you like about this bill, or whatever, if there's something you want to highlight when you're saying, I really want you to support this bill, for example, this bill has this in it, and you can just use that page and pull out specifics. We also have a one-pager which has the North Carolina League's position on redistricting, which of course is for an independent commission. So if you practice it a couple times, pencil in some changes or do what you want, then that you should be ready to call. And like I say, if you screw up, we all screw up. If you misstate something, don't beat yourself over the head with it. Just forget it. The important thing is that your voice was registered as someone who wants redistricting reform. And I was going to say the way it actually works. So I mentioned the committee. And this is spelled out in the briefing on how that actually works inside the legislature. So there are subcommittees for redistricting in the House and Senate, as we know. The Senate is for redistricting and elections because they have fewer people, so therefore they have fewer committees with broader sort of scopes of work, so they can make their meetings. So they will take up the redistricting map as a bill. And when they first they'll set the process and maybe some criteria as was mentioned, and then they will if they do what they have said that they're going to do, they will do something similar to what they did for the court-ordered redistricting, which was that they conducted it in public. They used starter maps that came from actually one of these multiple thousands of maps analyses. That they picked one of those through a process that involved the lottery ping pong ball machine, which you'd never expect to see in a legislative committee room, but there it was. They could claim that they were selecting them randomly, but that was all just a show. It didn't mean anything. So they will have some kind of a starter map will be used, and then they will modify that map, following the cluster process, working within each cluster. And then that will be transformed into a bill, which will be introduced in the committee, and it will have redistricting bills, maybe the most boring bills ever known to man, which is they are pages and pages of lists of census blocks, census tracts, precincts, counties, etc. Just page after page, listing VTD 711, VTD 712, VTD 714. Really exciting. They will also have some information that comes from the staff on how this map performs in terms of how compact it is and so forth. And that will be whatever the committee has told the staff to use as criteria. The staff will report that back as part of their report on the draft bill. Then it will be voted on, and there may be amendments. Legislators, and this is I've found interesting but kind of embarrassing, that legislators, I've certainly seen Democratic legislators raise their hands and say, no names, but I'm planning to move, and is there any way that my district can be modified to include my new house, and have that be granted to them? So they're doing that in public. God knows what's going on behind the scene. But then they will vote on the map, and that will then go, if it's in the House, this House map, the House votes on its own map only in committee. That will then go to the floor, where it can be amended, but it will certainly be voted on in the House. Then it will be sent to the Senate, and they will vote on the House's map. The same thing exactly happens on the Senate side. The committee meets, it sets some kind of process and criteria. It then proceeds to draw a map, and to vote on that map, and send it to the Senate, the full Senate, which votes on it and sends it back to the House for them to vote on it. Generally speaking, each House supports the other's map. So when it goes to the House, the Senate bill goes to the House, it's just they just approve it basically. But there's some interesting language that goes on in the on the floor to hear them talk about it. For example, Senator Hayes, I will never forget, in one of these drawings, it was the final vote in the Senate on some part of the map, and he stood up and said, that other people, people want us to give up our power to draw the maps, and we will never give up that power. So I said, okay. So we know where he stands, and I doubt that he's changed his mind in the intervening couple of years. But it can be interesting to watch them. There was nobody there but in the gallery, but maybe me and two other press people or something. But it is definitely interesting in the committees, and we hope that they will have an open process as they had before. So postcarding is, you guys know how to do postcards or letters, same thing. Use the proposed text for the different categories, like thanking them or asking them to hear the bills, etc. If you spend more than $10 and you've got receipts, you can submit it for reimbursement. Read the briefing, that's helpful. And we have our thank yous, and we have our hear the bills, and we have press the leadership to take action.